Have you ever found yourself playing Baldur's Gate 3 and thought, this sure is fun, but it would be a whole lot better if I could summon the elect accounts? Well, how's about we make a Franz build so you can do just that? As always, I'm aiming for fun and role-playing over min-maxing, so let's get into it. For the looks, we're going to be working from the Total War version of the character since that is, of course, the most popular version. First and foremost, he's a human. Nothing too crazy for species effects, decent movement, carry weight, and weapon proficiencies. For his looks, he's a pretty basic boy from what we can see, just a grumpy old pasty prince with a couple of facial scars from his years on the battlefield. Dazzling green eyes, no facial hair to speak of, and we've never actually seen him without his helmet, but we can assume he's got a clean cut for practicality in combat, as well as style when conducting government business. Don't forget, this lad isn't just a military leader, he's an emperor after all. For his starting class, I really think there is no better choice than fighter. The second wind thing doesn't really make a lot of sense, since I imagine he has servants and nurses that will come clean him up after combat, but I'll allow it since the class just fits so perfectly. And yes, we're going to be sticking to just fighter for the entire game. I don't think any other class fits him better than this, so we're taking it to the end. He is a master combatant from his years of military service. Despite essentially inheriting the throne of Emperor from his father at a young age, Karl was desperate to prove he was more than just his bloodline. His first course of action was clearing out chaotic threats from Empire lands, a task he personally took part in wherever possible, honing his military skills both for frontlines combat and leadership of his troops. He is without a doubt one of the greatest generals of all time, as well as one of the wisest emperors that humanity has ever seen. Since we can't play as a government employee, fighter really is the best pick for Karl, since we'll be able to pick up skills to improve his own battle prowess, as well as support his troops and, when necessary, give orders. For fighting style, I was torn between defense and great weapon fighting. Karl is known for his heavy armor and extreme damage from Galmaraz, the warhammer held by Sigmar himself some 2500 years before Karl. In the end, however, I settled on great weapon fighting. We'll be able to get him plenty tough with heavy armor and feats later on, so we might as well get him some extra damage to go with it. For his background, while an argument could be made for soldier, Karl was a noble first. Yes, he took part in training, but until he rose to emperor, his skills remained untested, so noble it is. This will let us pick up history and persuasion, which are both fitting skills for such a skilled politician. He knows the history of the empire which led him to target chaos so aggressively. We've of course all seen him unite the Order-tide factions of the world, and to convince even the dwarves to forget a grudge or two for the greater good. For his starting stats, since he's a fighter, we of course go with a lot of strength all the way up to 17. Yes, I know you don't get anything until you get an extra 2 points, but we'll pick up another later to get us to 18, which is a pretty good amount for a single stat. Going with 14 dex and constitution to give us some good footwork in battle, as well as the tankiness to absorb any hits that do make it through. Intelligence is going to be our lowest stat at 8. Now I know Karl isn't stupid, but in the context of the game, intelligence is things like magic, so it makes sense he's a little bit clueless since he has no magical powers himself. That's not to say he doesn't like magic, he has allies that take part in that, but personally, he keeps clean. Wisdom is going straight down the middle at 10. Again, he is very wise, yes, but with our limited points, there are simply just more important stats. Finally, Charisma, we're giving him a very small boost to 12, since it takes one smooth talker to unite every faction in the power-hungry Order-tide. For skills, we of course already have History for a +1 on intelligence rolls to at least keep us at neutral, and Persuasion for a +3 to Charisma persuasion rolls. We're also going to pick up Athletics for a +5 to Strength, since that makes total sense for this specimen of a fighter and warrior, then Intimidation for another 3 to Charisma rolls, since if anyone has Gravitas, it's this guy. And finally, Survival. Taking part in that many battles and surviving is no mean feat, making Karl quite the survivor, and the +2 to Wisdom rolls will be lovely to give him just a little bonus in that area. Now we've made our Karl, let's get into how exactly you want to gear him up and play him in game. Again, basing this from Total War, Karl is tough and hits extremely hard. He is a heavily armoured lord wielding a two-handed hammer for truly massive damage, and it just so happens we can do that here too. Full disclosure, I'm of course using mods to get these items that I think look best, so just pick items that fit the description rather than worrying about getting this exact fit, especially early on. So first up, heavy armor is of course a must. Since we're a fighter, we have proficiency with it all, so we can slip in something much less comfortable but much more protecting as soon as we get our hands on it, no problem. If you can find a helmet with a plume, then by all means go for it and keep it on at all times. This man's hairline is one of the most closely guarded secrets in all of the Empire, so if you can keep up the mystique, that'd be great. As for offense, as I said, he wields a two-handed warhammer, so that is an easy option to stick to. That being said, in Baldur's Gate, we also have mauls, and depending on the item, both can look very similar to Galmaraz, so choose whichever two-handed bludgeoning device you want, since both will work essentially the same for the build, and look great doing it. For ranged, he doesn't really ever use them in combat, so if you want to go full hardcore RP, you can refuse to equip one, but for convenience sake, I'd go with a heavy crossbow. It fits well with his already heavy build with heavy armor and heavy mallets, and the Empire is of course one of the first factions to use crossbows in game rather than bows, so why not? And lastly, a cape is a must. Bonus point if you can get some dyes and rock the proper Empire colours too. In combat, all this adds up to an extremely tanky boy that can easily take as many hits as he dishes out, and the ones he does dish out will be devastating. Every bit of damage he does will be crippling, whilst his enemies struggle to make a dent through his obscenely tough defenses. Outside of gear, Karl's role-playing playstyle is fairly straightforward. He is for sure lawful good as far as alignment goes. He wants nothing more than to protect the world from evil and chaos, and has a zero-tolerance policy to darkness and creatures of night. He welcomes the use of magic and technology as long as it's from a good or neutral source, but as soon as there's an element of darkness or corruption, he will not stand for it, and will take out the evil from the root to ensure it doesn't come up again. For companions, his best bets are probably Gale, Will, and Halsin. Astarion being a vampire obviously will leave a poor taste in Karl's mouth, and Shadowheart's allegiance to Shah is concerning to say the least, but if you want to take the Goths with you to try and fix them, I totally understand. Lae'zel is a bit of a question mark for me since she's not really similar to anyone in Warhammer that I can think of, and as a strong warrior would make an excellent ally if they can put aside their differences. Sadly, Karlach is likely a no, as she's a bit of a demon lady, and a lad like Karl will have a zero tolerance policy for that kind of thing, even if she is the hottest person in game. He has vanilla taste and avoids any sense of corruption and evil where possible, so purge any you come across and keep the world clean and safe. Outside of companions and onto choices in game, Karl looks after his own but can still see the bigger picture and the fate of the world, so prioritise keeping your allies safe, but the second most important thing should be the greater good. Reichland comes first, of course, but Reichland is part of the world, so do everything in your power to save it. Eliminate darkness where possible, make trustworthy allies where you can, and save the world whilst bringing honour to the Empire and Sigmar. And yes, this does mean you're not going to be eating the other parasites you find along the way. Karl wants to get rid of corruption, including that in himself, so avoid growing this part of your powers wherever possible. Now for leveling up. As I said, we're sticking to Fighter all the way through to the end, so it's really very simple for the most part since Fighter is by far one of the simplest classes in game, but that doesn't mean that they are not extremely powerful. So level 2 we pick up Action Surge, nothing not to love here for some extra actions. Level 3 we get to pick our subclass, and Battlemaster makes the most sense for me. Just look at the description and tell me that doesn't scream Karl Franz, a paragon of tactical superiority? Yes please. Anyway, this lets us pick up our first maneuvers, which can use at the expense of superiority dice to give us an edge in combat. I'm first going with Rally, Sweeping Attack, and Commander's Strike. Rally and Commander's Strike fit the greatest general of all time character perfectly. Rally will let us give allies temporary HP to keep them fighting longer, and Commander's Strike will let us give allies orders to attack even if Karl himself isn't able to. Finally, Sweeping Attack because some area damage goes a long way, and with a massive mallet, you really should be able to hit a few people anyway. At level 4 we get our first feat, and I'd start with Great Weapon Master. It's going to be much easier and cheaper to get hold of a two-handed weapon early on than it is a full set of heavy armour, so that can wait till later. If we crit with our two-handed weapon, as unlikely as that is, we'll get another attack as a bonus action, so nothing not to love there. As well as this, we can take a -5 to our attack rolls in exchange for a +10 to damage rolls, so we might miss a few more times, but when we hit, it's hitting big. And if this really bothers you and you keep missing, it can be toggled off any time, but personally, I think it's extremely worth the risk. Early game fights will be a breeze of the amount of damage this build can throw out this early. At level 5 we get an extra attack, so again, nothing not to love there. Level 6 is another feat, and this time we're going with Sentinel, which will again be useful straight away even if you don't have anything like heavy armour or even a two-handed weapon, and it fits well with Karl leading from the front and protecting his allies. It'll let us use our reactions to attack those who attack our allies, prevent them from attacking us again, and have an increased chance of successful reaction attacks. At level 7 we get another superiority die and 2 more maneuvers. I'm going to go with Precision Attack and Pushing Attack. Precision just lets us get more chance of landing a good hit, and Pushing lets us deal damage and potentially push the target backwards, which can be useful for creating space or dealing more damage with terrain. Level 8 is another feat, and I'm finally getting Heavy Armor Master. Get our strength up to 18 and reduce all damage by 3, which is pretty significant whilst wearing heavy armor, which will already be keeping us extremely protected. The bottom line, extreme tankiness. At level 9, it's an advantage to saving throws to keep him even more out of harm's way. At level 10, we're getting improvements to our superiority dice, making maneuvers far more deadly. We also get 2 more maneuvers, so I'm going for Goading and Distracting. Goading attack lets us deal more damage and goads the target into attacking Karl by placing the disadvantage on attacks on anything else. This is great paired with his tankiness to keep his allies safe and deal some great damage in the process. And Distracting Strike is kind of the opposite, giving allies advantage on attacks on that target to let everyone deal more damage to them. Bottom line is, both our abilities fit for a leader of the party and the Empire. Level 11, we get yet another attack, and finally at level 12, it's a final feat, and I chose Tough to make this lad unbearably tanky. Like if you die at level 12, you're either facing the literal world or doing something super wrong. 2 hit points per level on top of your existing hit points, with heavy armor, it's just absurd levels of tankiness. At max power of this build, Karl will be nearly unkillable whilst also dealing a crapload of damage himself, as well as having a couple of abilities to assist his allies and truly lead from the front. I believe this build is as close as you can get to the Emperor of Man, who's a great battler and an even better general. In combat, you'll be an unstoppable force and immovable object, and in conversation, a level-headed and persuasive moral compass, dead set on finding the best solution to keep humanity and the world at large safe from corruption and evil. And that's my Karl Franz build. Let me know what you think of the build, or if there's anything you'd change down in the comments below. Also be sure to let me know what other builds you'd like to see. It doesn't have to be from Warhammer, anything you like. Like, subscribe, and if you want more Baldur's Gate 3 content, then check out this video to see my Geralt build.